a good general comment can be very helpful to us. But if there are issues in the general comment that we don't agree with, it really weakens our position with our governments, because we can't ask them to do things if they then say that contravenes the convention or contravenes the committee's interpretation of Article 24. So what I'm going to try to do today, for some reason I have, okay, is to first of all just review the timeline for the adoption of the general comment, talk about from our preliminary review what some of the strengths of the draft general comment are, look at some of the issues of concern that we've raised or that have been raised to us so far, get your input on some additional issues of concern, and also give us some advice on how Inclusion International can help its members. So first of all, I hope that all of you have had a chance to read the draft general comment. The deadline for reaction to the committee on this draft is January 5th. And given that this is holiday time for many people, there's going to be a lot of pressure on to get the comments in by then. But the feedback that we get from today's webinar and from the one on Thursday in Spanish will help to draft Inclusion International's input. The committee will be meeting starting towards the end of March. The actual committee session will take place starting March 29th, and a number of countries will be reporting to the CRPD committee then: Serbia, Thailand, Chile, Slovakia, Portugal, Lithuania, and Uganda. And in addition, before that session starts, there will be a pre-sessional working group from March 21st to 24th, at which Ethiopia, Moldova, Italy, United Arab Emirates, Colombia, and Uruguay will be reviewed. So we expect, we're not exactly sure how the general comment will be dealt with in the session, but we're interested in knowing who, if any of you or people who are part of your organizations or people that you know will plan to be in Geneva during any of that time, so that we can take advantage of your presence. Now, Inez, are you going to show the poll, or I show the poll, okay? And we're going to get you to answer this, please, and tell us if you're planning to be in Geneva for either the 15th session or the pre-sessional working group.
Raquel will send the poll because I cannot do it.
Okay, so you're all going to receive the poll now?
We can see it. Ines has just launched, Diane has launched it, so we can see it on the screen. Thanks.
Oh, no.
But how do
that's
people...
the presentation.
Oh, that's the slide. Sorry about that. Okay.
People are not able to see it.
I hear you. Okay, it's coming in.
I'm glad this is a friend. We all are surrounded by friends.
Yes, you can see that webinars are not one of the things that I'm most comfortable with.
So the poll is in the screen, so people should answer the poll.
Okay, 72 people have voted, so let's just give them a few more seconds. Okay. $89 people.
So can you close the poll?
Close it.
Yeah.
I will share it.
And that's the result from the. You can see the result, no, Diane?
Possibly. I just don't know where to look.
Okay, so 19% said yes, they will be in Geneva.
Oh, great.
56% said no, and 25% said maybe.
Okay. So for the people who said they will be there after this webinar, we're going to ask you to send us your information so that we can stay in touch. Okay, thank you very much. That's great.
So Raquel, you can close the poll so that Diane's screen will come back.
Okay, can you see my screen again?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So first of all, just a quick review of some of the main strengths of the draft general comment. I think first of all, a very important victory is that if you remember, looking at the convention, Article 24 is titled Education. But the title of this draft general comment refers to the right to inclusive education. And I think that, as a starting point, that is extremely important. The draft provides a lot of good arguments that our members can use when trying to convince people of why inclusive education is good and important. It presents the educational case, the social case, the economic case. It identifies a number of the most common barriers to inclusion. Very importantly, it defines the right as a process that transforms culture, policy, and practice in all educational environments. And the issue of transformation is one that we've really been stressing as showing that inclusion cannot be achieved through simply incremental changes, that it really requires a drastic transformation of the education system. It distinguishes, I'm just going to be going through these very quickly because you can certainly read the whole draft. It distinguishes between segregation, integration, and inclusion. It recognizes that placing students in mainstream classes without appropriate does not constitute inclusion. That's very important for us to underline, not only dealing with governments, but also dealing with a number of people who say inclusion doesn't work, because what they've seen is just dumping of students with disabilities in mainstream classes without support. The draft prohibits exclusion based on impairment or on the degree of impairment, and really negates the commonly used concept that inclusion can be practiced just to the extent of the potential of the individual. It really puts the emphasis on the system needing to be, it's the potential of the system, not the potential of the individual. It says that denial of reasonable accommodation is discrimination, and that means it's immediately applicable and not subject to a slower process of implementation. It says that any support measures must be compliant with the goal of full inclusion. It underlines that education must rest with the education ministry, and so that social ministries should not continue to have responsibility for students with disabilities. Calls for a transfer of resources from segregated to inclusive environments. It recognizes the important role of families in a number of different places, and it calls for new assessment methods. So a lot of these are issues that we and all of you raised with the committee in the steps leading up to the drafting of the general comment. Overall, my sense is that the draft is pretty good. There are some issues that raise some concern. The first one, and I think that for me, this is really the most critical at this point in time when so many governments are reducing spending on social issues and reducing spending in education in particular. In paragraph 39, the draft refers to the situation when governments are under financial pressure. And their way of dealing with it is to say that deliberately retrogressive measures would require the most careful consideration. What they're saying is that states shouldn't go backwards on inclusion unless they've really thought about it. Well, all governments are going to say that they've thought about it if they're going backwards. My sense is that the point we need to make here is that cutbacks that affect the inclusion of students with disabilities are discrimination. And any system has options for how it will make cutbacks. Class sizes could be larger. They could cut other elements of the curriculum. They could cut music. They could cut art. They could reduce spending on materials. But so to me, it's really important that we emphasize that any efforts to reduce spending should not be done in a way that impacts disproportionately on students with disabilities. What we've seen in some places is that when there are cutbacks, teaching assistants are reduced, or parents are told that their children can only go to school half a day. We have to make sure that things like that don't happen and that those are seen as discrimination. Some other points that we've identified that are also worth considering. Paragraph 67 stresses early intervention, but there's no mention to the fact that early intervention also needs to be inclusive, and I think that we want to underline that. One issue that's been raised by some others that we wanted to check with you is referred to in paragraph 73A, where the draft talks about, sorry, I'm just getting the exact text here. It talks about a whole education institution approach in which an initial group of teachers within a given learning environment is trained in inclusive education. So far, so good. And in turn take responsibility for educating others, ultimately extending to the whole staff. That also potentially could work. And then they say this approach can be extended to other education institutions where teachers for one will train those at the next using a trainer of trainers model. Now I think the concept of people with experience supporting others is a good one, but some people have raised the question as to whether this paragraph really supports simply a trainer of trainers model or a cascade model of training that some people think is not effective. So we want to do another poll here and ask you whether you think that this is an issue that we should be raising, and do you think that a trainer of trainers model should be encouraged? So Raquel, can you conduct this poll?
Yes, Diane, I've just launched it, so people should be able to see it on their screen. Okay, we'll give it a few more seconds. Okay, thank you everyone. I'm going to close it. Diane, can you see the results?
No.
Okay. So we have 50% said yes, 19% said no, and 31% said they're not sure.
Okay, that is very helpful. Again, though, if you want to provide us with more information as to why you voted in a certain way, that would be really helpful to us in drafting our response. Thank you. Another issue that we had some questions about, paragraph 73B recommends that special schools should be converted into resource centers and used to support inclusion. This is another issue that we've really seen as problematic in the past, when the staff who are used to working in segregated settings become the ones who supposedly are supporting inclusion. And we have had some evidence of at least one good reference to this working, but we want your opinion on this. Do you think that it's good practice for special schools to be converted to resource centers and for them to become the resource for supporting inclusion? So do you agree with this approach? Raquel, can you open the poll, please?
Yes, it's open now, Diane.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's everybody. Thank you. Okay, so we have 73%, sorry, 40% said yes, 30% said no, and 30% are not sure.
Okay, so again, I would say a bit equivocal on this one. Again, any more details that you can provide us on if that's been success, particularly if you've had success with that in your region or country, it would be great to get good examples to refer to. Similarly, if you've had bad experiences, we'd like to hear about them. Okay, now that another issue that was of concern to us relates to the focus on international cooperation. Paragraph 58 makes reference to this, but given that Goal 4 of the Sustainable Development Goals calls for inclusive education, there's an opportunity for much more focus, not just in bilateral support for education, but also through multilateral activities to ensure that all investments in education can be inclusive. So this was one issue that we thought needed to be stressed in the draft. So we didn't want to set this up so that this would just be a one-way talk of me talking to you. So we'd really like to hear from you now about what we should add to our issues of concern or any emphasis that we should add. So this is your chance to either raise your hand by pressing the icon on the screen or to write your ideas in the chat box. So can you let us know, in your opinion, what should we add to our issues of concern?
So I'm not quite sure why I'm hearing a lot of noise. No, it's much better now. So I am trying to follow up on the hands that are raised. I'm not quite sure that they were raised before Diane is asking the question. So I have a hand raised from Abdul Hamed, but I cannot give a microphone because he doesn't have a microphone, or she, sorry. And so if the concerns can be raised through the question panel or through the chat panel, and also a hand raised by Yuma Ali. So I'll give the microphone in case she needs. So you're on mute. Do you have a question? Okay. I don't think she has, so I'll mute her again. But we have a question from Kate Lapham. She says, in particular, I am concerned that there is a huge emphasis on the teacher, which is appropriate in some ways, but has some perhaps unintended consequences. It completely marginalizes the role of a school principal, which is quite important. It also has the effect of making the classroom the unit of analysis rather than the school. This is potentially isolating for teachers, is highly indicative of an assumption of per capita funding, and risks denying inclusive education in extracurricular activities or other parts of the school day.
Okay, that's an excellent and very important point, Kate. We will definitely make note of that. I just want to remind everyone that in the guidelines that the committee issued for in seeking reaction to the draft general comment, they've asked for specific wording that people would like to see, and it changes to specific paragraphs. So certainly you're right that the reference to teachers goes throughout. I think we would need to decide what the best way is to add all of these points, and probably would require an extra numbered paragraph as well as some changes. So Kate, if you want to send us any specific changes that you would recommend, we'd be happy to include those.
If anyone else has a question or raising a concern, you can either raise your hand in your panel and I'll give you the microphone, or you can write it as Kate did. So Fadia Farah, so she says, our big problem is the attitude of our government. They are refusing to open the school for persons with intellectual disability and still send them to institutions. It will be helpful if we can include a message to the government.
That certainly is an issue. I think that relates to the entire approach of governments to implementation of the convention. I was pleased to see that there is a specific reference to deinstitutionalization in the draft comment, and I think it's also important that the draft recognizes the need for so many other articles of the convention to be complied with in order to achieve inclusive education. And while certainly that goes beyond the purview of the ministries of education, I think it relates to the overall requirement for governments to change their paradigm in thinking about people with disabilities in implementing the convention. So we can look at some of the specific references to articles, Fadia, and see how we can build that in. But I think that's more than one paragraph, because it really is requiring governments to fundamentally change their, as you say, their attitudes and the way that they think about people with disabilities.
Diane, it's Connie. Ines, sorry to interrupt. Just on that point, Diane, did you see anywhere? I can't off the top of my head see anywhere in the general comment that talks about admissions, particularly of children, or non-refusal. Is there a section on that? What I'm thinking about is Fadia's point about getting in the door, like discrimination of like being not admitted.
Yes, there is. I mean, it does say, I'm not going to be able to put my hand on it immediately, but they're pretty clear that all children need to be able to go to school, and that denial of reasonable accommodation constitutes discrimination. So they don't use the term zero reject,
right?
But I think that's certainly the implication of what they're saying.
Okay, so Fadia, just to your point, we will, I think, try to find a place to underline the issue of non-rejection. I'm not exactly sure how we'll do it given what their wording is, but I think the point about admission from the get-go is really important.
So I have another question, and to the attendees, it's really good when you write the questions because or your concerns, because that way we will have them as backup of all this conversation. So Maria Gomez Carrillo de Castro, she's saying, I believe other groups involved in education also need to receive training or support. For example, parents of other children, as they often put pressure on education centers to not accept the students with disability. They are on huge impact on school functioning. They have a huge impact on schools functioning.
That is a very good point, and we can build that in to section again that deals with implementation of our other articles of the convention in terms of the need for public sensitization. So we will add that. Thank you for that.
Diane, we have another comment from Juma Ali. He says, in the draft comment at 62, I recommend that state parties review the existing legislation that prohibiting discrimination on the ground of disability instead of introducing new legislation. I think we need to review the existing legislation.
Thank you. Yes, that is strange, a strange way to write it, since many may have some legislation in place. So we will take a look at that one. Any others?
Yes, there is Fadia, again, she's saying that she thinks the language, but in answer perhaps to the question that she had raised before, she says, sorry, but this is a language that our government do not understand.
I guess I'll turn this up to everyone who's on this webinar, suggestions for how we might introduce the need for attitude change of the government into this general comment. We can make an explicit point of that, but how do we word it so that governments will actually hear it? The idea you're asking a very difficult question. Anyone want to respond to that, or else add any other issues that we should be raising? Okay, if not, I'm going to go to my last question to you, and that's how can Inclusion International help its members? As I mentioned, we will be drafting a response to the draft general comment. We hope that many of you will also be doing the same, and we're wondering how we can help you in that process or in your participation in Geneva.
So again, here we are inviting you to the question panel to ask your questions, or if you want to do it by voice, just raise your hand and I'll give you the microphone.
And just in relation to the last question, Diane, we have Sue Swenson. She said that was a great question and she would like to volunteer to dig in. So.
Oh, terrific. Okay. Thank you. We accept your offer, Sue.
And Diane, they are asking you if you repeat the questions, and I'm not quite sure that is about this one or it was the one before about language, Maria Gomez. So if you can repeat the question that we are asking now,
okay.
It would be nice.
Just to let you know that we will be drafting our response, our reaction to the general comment based on input from this webinar and from other things that we receive from you. But we hope that many of you will also be submitting. We also were really pleased to hear at the beginning of the call that many of you actually plan to be in Geneva. So the question is, how can we help you either in your submissions or in any activities that you may be involved in Geneva?
Okay, so we have a comment from Juan Coveñas. So he's saying, maintain us informed about steps of advocacy in different organisms.
Sorry, repeat that, Inez?
He says that some ideas of how we can help is maintain us informed about the steps of advocacy in different organisms.
Okay, that's very good. So I will leave it to the technical people. You can see that I'm not one of them, but through the Inclusion International website, we can try to keep track, and through the newsletter, keep track of activities that people are involved in to influence the general comment.
So that's what he also adds, that trading in different fields, for example, about Article 2, but I guess it's Article 24, definitions of communication and things like that.
Okay, that is something that I know that Inclusion International is working on, and hopefully we will hear something soon about how that's going to be approached.
So we have another question from Tara Princeton. When do you expect to have Inclusion International submission complete? It will be helpful for us to have your draft as a basis to complete our own, so our positions are aligned. If you can share Inclusion International's draft and perhaps the draft of, somehow.
Hi, Ines. It's Connie. I'm going to suggest that we will try to circulate something before the holidays, so the week of the 19th, so that people will, or the week after the 19th, I should say, so that people will have a chance to make comments on our submission, but also use it to inform their work. We'll then, I guess, take a last look at it and send it close to the deadline, because we want to give people a chance to have time to give us feedback.
And Tara is also adding that perhaps if others can share drafts, if they are prepared early, that will be helpful, so the positions can be aligned.
And we're happy to coordinate sharing of those drafts. So if people have their drafts ready early enough and they want to share them, we can create an internal. Unfortunately, we won't be able to post them on our website unless you tell us that you want us to do that. But we could take the list of people who've been on our calls and ask whether they want to be part of a group sharing drafts before they go out. So we'll send out a note to the people who've been on this call and who are on the call later this week and ask whether people are willing to share email addresses, and we'll put a group together just for sharing of drafts and inputs.
So Abdul Hamed says, we have serious problems of out-of-school children. They are disproportionately excluded from system. They are about 90%. And also Don Porter is saying, thanks, CICL will prepare a draft. Also.
Just in response to the out of school, thank you for raising that. That was a real oversight on my part in not mentioning that, because there is no reference in the general comment that I can recall to the huge numbers of out of school children who have a disability. So I think we definitely need to add a new paragraph saying that there has to be a strategy developed to ensure that children who are out of school because of disability are included. Any other comments?
Faria is saying if there is anything that can be included in the general comments about the situation of the refugees with disability.
There is a paragraph on that, Fadia, on people in refugee and emergency situations, but let's take a look at it and make sure that you think it's strong enough. Any others?
I don't see any others.
Okay. Well, hopefully this is the beginning of a conversation, not the end. So I do want to say thank you, and I want to suggest that if you want to follow up, that you write to Anna McQuarrie. Her address is on the screen. It's amcquarrie@inclusioninternational.org. And as Connie mentioned, we also will communicate directly with all of you to see if you're willing to be part of a group that we can keep informed about this process, and that will allow you to share your drafts with everybody else that's participated in order to get you know, a coherent message going to the committee.
I will, after this is finished, you will receive a survey. If you could answer that survey, will be great. And also for you to know, Inclusion International will be posting the video of this webinar in their website. So if you want to share with others, if you want to hear it again, or if you want to share it with others, it will be available soon in our website. And we will let all of you, since we all have the information of you as attendees, we will let you know when that is ready.
Sorry, Diane, before we go, I've just seen a question from Juma Ali. She's using the chat box. That's what is not showing on the question panel. But I think it's quite important. He wants to know, how will Inclusion International empower its members? We need to understand and get knowledge on these general comments within our organizations. This will help us to have concrete contributions.
Thank you. I think maybe, Connie, I'm going to turn to you to answer. For those of you who don't know, Connie Lauren Bowie is the Executive Director of Inclusion International, and I know that initiative is being worked on to support members. Connie, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. I think that in addition to the specific process of contributing to the committee's work, our members in many parts of the world are increasingly working with their governments and with their schools and communities to figure out how best to include children with disabilities and in our case, children who've been very marginalized, children with intellectual disabilities. And increasingly they're asking us about both the advocacy strategies, as one I think raised the question earlier, but also about that, what does it look like when a government says, okay, we'll do it, how do we do it? We need to have, I think, in our network, the ability to respond to those questions. And increasingly, our members are asking us, what does that look like, and what resources do we have that we can use to do implementation, to support inclusion at a whole bunch of levels. We are looking at what Inclusion International as a global network can provide in response to our members. I think it's going to be a combination of resources. It might include training materials, it might include access to people who can come and provide technical support, it might include supports to families to do advocacy in their school systems. We don't have a clear picture of how to structure that yet, but we're talking to a number of partners in the network and thinking about launching something in the next year or so that would allow our members to access resources that exist in these areas, and that we can help to put them into place in a way that people at a community level can pick up and use in practical terms, so that our members would have direct access to training materials, people, human resources that they can use in responding to opportunities where they exist, and where there aren't opportunities, they can use to create those opportunities for inclusion. So I hope that's sufficiently vague.
And I think Abdul is trying to ask a question using his microphone, so we're going to open Abdul's microphone. Can you hear us? Abdul, are you there? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Abdul.
Okay. We have another problem here. The problem is that when we try to include the children with disabilities into the mainstream schooling, they say that only the children with mild disabilities can be included in inclusion. I think it's a different definition. We internationally know what is the inclusion, but here in Pakistan they are interpreting it that inclusion means that including children with mild disability into mainstream schooling. I think we need to notice that point, because if we do that, then we'll be leaving out of school a lot of children, even we have included children. So after inclusion, I fear that there will remain bulk of students who are with severe disabilities, and somehow they are not fit into the definition of inclusion.
Thank you, Abdul. I think that your comment raises an issue of how we respond to the general comment, because they do try to address that issue, but I think maybe what we need to do is to highlight what the problem is in our response, again, to ensure that governments really understand what the message is. The message might be too subtle in the general comment the way it's drafted right now. So we will look at that. And Connie and Anna, what I'm just thinking of is we've had some good input so far from this call. I'm thinking of just the slides that we had developed on the main strengths and the main concerns that we had drafted for this call. Why don't we edit those based on the comments that we've had today and send those out to everybody who's been on the call for further input rather than just waiting for the final document to be drafted? Can we do that within the next day or so? Because we could use it on the Spanish call on Thursday as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So
I would like to add,
that was a good point.
and Abdul, I'm sorry I missed some of your comment here before for the question that you were asking about out-of-school children. So he says that, so we need to ask member states to particularly focus on this issue. So complementing what he just said. And also another comment from Juan Coveñas about what Inclusion International can do. He talks about overtraining online.
Mm-hmm. Those are
Good
helpful.
idea, Juan. Good.
I don't see any more questions. I don't see any more raised hands.
There is just one more coming from. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. It's here. From Juma Ali. She says.
I'm not sure if I am not receiving them.
No, it's because they're sending them privately. I don't know why.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, here it is. We experience some challenges in including learners with developmental disabilities in inclusive settings. We see that there are inadequate resources that will help them to have, for example, vocational training skills. Are there any strategies that will be used to ensure that these learners benefit in inclusive settings?
I think what your question is really addressing is that the draft general comment is written in generalities and does about the specific challenges for people with different disabilities. So, I mean, there are references to vocational training, but after hearing from you, we'll take another look at that and see if we can strengthen it.
Okay, I think that's it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think we see any more questions. If we miss something, blame it on Raquel and I. And because you did a great job, Diane. Thank you very much.
Well, thank everybody who's on the call, and thank you especially for putting up with my lack of technological skills. And the input has been great. Thank you very much.